In terms of what we were talking about in terms of a humanitarian pause versus a ceasefire, what's your view on that? Because Antony Blinken seems to think, and the US seems to think, a humanitarian pause is good enough.
Yes. No, a humanitarian pause, frankly, is simply a lull between one massacre and the other. It's just a small reprieve between massacres. What we're seeing is an outright slaughter of Palestinians. We're talking about more than 10,000 people almost dead now, more than 30% of the housing stock gone, thousands of people injured. More than half of these are children. So it's catastrophic at every single level. When it comes to Arab countries, yes, it's not surprising that everybody's pushing for a ceasefire. It's not just the governments there that are pushing for ceasefire. Washington is witnessing one of the biggest anti-war demonstrations today, as we speak, asking for a ceasefire in Gaza. So I think and we've seen the same in London and Berlin and Iraq. I mean, across the region and the world, we're seeing demonstrations asking for a ceasefire, because what is happening is simply, unacceptable by any measure.
Stephen, what's your response to that?
Well, of course, there's huge death toll in the Gaza Strip as the Israelis unleash the full force of the IDF on the Gaza Strip. And global public opinion is quickly turned against Israel after the terrorist attack of October 7th. Yet in Washington, both in Congress as well as the White House, there remains a view that a ceasefire will set up a situation, an environment where Hamas will once again be able to threaten Israel's security. And as a result, the United States is only calling for a humanitarian pause. It is obviously an extraordinarily difficult position for the United States to be in, given the global public opinion and the suffering that's happening in the Gaza Strip. But nevertheless, that seems to be the policy of the Biden administration.
And Maha, in terms of what Israel is saying, they're saying that actually a break, and as we've touched on with Stephen, a break in the fighting would allow Hamas to regroup, to be able to kind of get their resources together and attack again. And that wouldn't just be a threat to Israel, it would be a threat to Palestinian people, to people in Gaza as well.
Honestly, that just doesn't make sense to me. When just take a look at what's happening in Gaza today. Humanitarian pause, again, for me, a humanitarian pause is literally a lull between massacres. But a humanitarian pause just to give people a breathing space from the bombing and to get essential food, electricity, water in. Just what we just saw in the the lead up to this discussion. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, what do? You continue punishing 2.1 million Palestinians in the way. In what we're seeing, versus because you're worried that Hamas may be able to regroup, and I don't believe that is the case in any way. A humanitarian lull of a few days is really going to allow them to gather their strength and regroup somehow to launch a new terror attack. I don't think they can. They can barely deal with the onslaught that they're having right now. The other thing I would also say that. History shows us that if you want to get rid of organizations like Hamas, violence is not going to be the way to do it. Look at ISIS, massive campaign against ISIS, the destruction of Mosul and of Raqqa, and ISIS is still alive and kicking. Taliban kicked out for 20 years and then they came back. And one can use a lot more examples.